Good afternoon. Um, I've been thinking about doing a re-look at the Jon Benet Ramsey case, and I decided just to go ahead and do it. So I'm going to start with a little song, and I want to give a shout out to Alex Irie09 for this video. Yeah, I feel it's a good way to start this off. And this is going to be in several different segments because I'm going to take an in-depth look at every possibility that could have happened to this little girl. I also was raised in childhood beauty pageants. We did them every single solitary weekend. And um, so I'm going to come at this probably with a little different perspective than than people who are not exposed to that. Because honestly, I'm just going to be truthful with you. I really, at this point, don't think that the pageants themselves had anything to do with her death. Okay, I don't think that like some stranger or something saw her at a pageant and came in her house and did something to her. I do not think at all anything like that happened. I was never exposed to anybody that did anything weird to me at a pageant, and I did them literally every weekend from the time I was 4 years old until I was about 17. So, but I will say this: there are mothers that put their children in pageants. And my mom was a little bit of a stage mom, but she was not abusive like this. But I have seen mothers that I saw abuse their kids. I mean, I'm just going to call it out for what it is. Um, they were such stage mothers that literally, if their child messed up on stage, they would beat them, or they would just have so much like fear that they wouldn't win or that if they would mess up, that their mom would, I mean, abuse them basically. And I was just a kid back then, and I was like thinking that that was really bad and that wasn't right. And I was a little scared of my mom too sometimes, but she would never spank me or anything like that that had anything to do with me not doing well in a pageant. I mean, she was a little bit on the stage mother side, like I said, but I loved my mother, and she was, a good mother. I didn't choose to raise my children and put them in pageants every weekend. Of course, they did do a couple. And see, this is what I think happens. I think so many people that grow up doing pageants, they end up putting their children in them, which is what the case was with Patsy Ramsey. And I think this is what happens sometimes. Um, I think that they have such a facade or just a face to put up when they stay in these pageants like this. I mean, and they just get so sucked in, just like anything else, like gambling or anything. It's just very addictive sometimes. I think it is like gambling. And I think that these mothers, some of them are narcissistic and they are living vicariously through their children. Like they're too old to compete anymore, so therefore they start over with their kids. And I think that's what happens sometimes. Not always. And I did put my kids in a couple of my girls in a couple. I did, but eh, mostly my mom was alive back then, and I mean we just kind of put them in a couple. But um, since my mom passed away, I literally have maybe put my daughter in two pageants, and uh, yeah, it's been a long time since she's done one. So I don't know. I think the older I've gotten, the more I've looked at it, and the more I've realized that some of it is not normal, and the excessive makeup that they're using these days, which I mean, I wore a lot of makeup too back then, even whenever I was growing up. It was a lot of makeup and the big teased hair and all that kind of stuff. And I remember having to sleep with rollers all night that hurt. Uh, it was a lot to it. But then, I mean, there were fun things too because you got to make friends with people all over the United States and in other countries, in some of the pageants I was in. So, like, it's not all a bad thing. And I think people just grabbed a whole, or the media really pushed this, but the pageant aspect of um, the situation, and they like wanted to just like hyper focus on that and not look at anything else. And honestly, I think that has the least to do with anything other than the fact that Pat Ramsey may have been a little bit overly concerned with appearances more so than her child. And I'll leave that at that. So let's start with this video, and then we'll get into it. The part one version, anyway.
I come through the door. You're not sitting by the table anymore. I look away. Can't hold this image in my mind. I wish I was blind to the hope your face will bring. Why should I keep this guilt wrapped up in chains? Pain again, 'cause my heart's not made that way. We can be just as close if I am far away. Love you enough to stay, to stay. Oceans of love fill my empty heart, and I wonder, would it always be the same? Carry me inside, these feelings will not die. You'll be with me forever. Why should I keep this guilt wrapped up in chains? Pain again, 'cause my heart's not made that way. We can be just as close if I am far away. Love you enough to stay, to stay. way. We will be just as close though I am far away. I love you enough to stay, to stay.
Okay. Well, when I see her name too, Jon Benet Patricia Ramsey. Not very many people name their children, or not many women name children after them. I thought, I don't know. Some, I guess, do, but I don't know. I feel like that is a little telling also that Jon Benet was like a little mini me to her mom, who also did pageants. I don't know how old she was when she started doing them, but I know she did do them for getting married and having Jon Benet. So I'm gonna go ahead because I want to look at every aspect of this case because I feel like that people wasted so much time looking looking in the wrong direction. Like I said, they were looking for some kind of connection with pageants, and we can talk about all this pageant stuff later. And in fact, later, not I'm not going to say in this one, but I'll get it together and I will share some of the from some of my pictures from back when I competed, from different age groups, just a sampling, just to show you that indeed I did grow up in them, and that that is why I never have been able to just let this case go. Um, and I'm not saying that pageants are all great, or that that there are not bad things that go along with beauty pageants, and children especially. Looking back, like I said, um, I do think that it is a little bit much, a little early sometimes. So I'll just stop with that for right now and get to. Um, I've got to share it. Hold on. Dr. Phil went back and looked at this again. Okay, Burke, he's a very different kind of kid, and there is just something about Burke that I don't know what to. I don't know how to put my finger on it. I just feel like there's so many unanswered questions when it comes to him, and you have to think about this for a minute, okay? The letter. That's okay. That's why I use this video, because it began with the letter, which I feel everything hinges on that letter, because I have studied psychology for many years. I was going to be a child psychologist. I ended up not being able to finish. Um, I wished I could have. I might go back and finish now that my children are all grown and my last one is graduating this year. And I very well may go back. But I love forensic psychology. That is also where a passion of mine is. And so, I'm sorry, that's my cats. So anyway, I don't know if anyone read that ransom letter, but let me see if I can share that actually. Um, because it, if you haven't seen the ransom letter, um, then you would understand what I'm trying to say, because it is okay. First of all, it was on Patsy Ramsey's own personal ledger book, okay, that you would write, down, jot down notes, or a grocery list or something. I think that she kept with her own pen, okay, that she kept in a drawer. Now think about this, okay, what person is going to come into their home after they got back from a party at a friend's house, the Whites. It was for a Christmas party on Christmas Eve, and they got home fairly late, and supposedly John Benet fell asleep on the way home, and her father, John Ramsey, took her up to her bed and put her in her bed. So that begs to differ a little bit with what Burke said. And Burke was on Dr. Phil. And so I'm going to show some of the Dr. Phil scenes. I'm not going to use all of them. And I just want to say that I'm going to use it with the fair use copyright that says that you can use other people's films for critiquing or educational purposes. So I'm going to use that. I was going to read the ransom note, but I have a feeling that they're going to end up going over that anyway. So let's see if I can find it. Okay, here we are. And we'll go to that.
Always proclaimed their innocence.
The night that your sister Jon Benet was killed, there were only 3 people in that house that we know the identity of. You're the one that has never spoken.
Jon Benet's brother, Burke Ramsey, finally breaks his silence.
This Christmas is the 20-year anniversary.
The killer has never been found.
Some people have speculated that you've been hiding out for this last 20 years. What do you say to that? Do you remember the last time you saw Jon Benet alive?
Jon Benet Ramsey's skull was fractured on the right side of her head.
Did you hit your sister over the head with a baseball bat or a flashlight? Had you ever violently attacked her before? Did you murder your sister, Jon Benet?
The exclusive interview, 20 years in the making. Now, from Boulder, Colorado, it's the season premiere of Dr. Phil.
For 2 decades, the unsolved murder of 6-year-old Jon Benet Ramsey has remained one of the most mysterious cold cases in history. The child beauty queen's body was found the day after Christmas in 1996, here in the basement of her family's 15.
Also, can I just say right now that I'm not a fan of Dr. Phil's either. I find him quite creepy. But I just wanted to mention that at least, I mean, this is a good compilation of what happened, basically. I'm just going to tell you, I don't advocate Dr. Phil. I'm just using this as a resource for many of the facts of the case. All right. And we'll go forth with that. And also just pay attention to her brother's face, Burke's face. He just has the weirdest smile and the weirdest just grin. It's almost like he looks like the cat that ate the canary, and I just find it so odd. And if you think about it for a minute, this is just one theory. But okay, if they knew for a fact that he had killed his sister or hurt his sister, I can see that that would be their only other child. So it's possible that they could have protected him and try to stage it to make it look like a kidnapping, but kidnappers don't leave 3-page ransom notes in writing that inside of the person's house that they're going to kidnap their child, and then they leave the child in the house in the basement anyway. Like, what is the ransom for? And there was never anybody to contact them about a ransom. So we'll get into that.
Room mansion in Boulder, Colorado. Today, the home is surrounded by an iron fence and hidden by trees. It even has a new address, But nothing can erase the haunting image of the path decorated with candy canes for Christmas, dusted with snow, surrounded by police tape.
To those of you who may want to ask, let me address you very directly. I did not kill my daughter, Jon Benet.
We were kidnapping. Hurry, please explain to me what's going on, okay?
Let me assure you that I did not kill Jon Benet.
Okay, what's your name? Are you Kathy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I did not have anything to do with it. I love that child with my whole of my heart and soul.
It's the mysterious murder case of an American sweetheart who's responsible for the death of little Jon Benet.
In the 35 years I've been doing this, I've never seen a case like the unsolved murder of Jon Benet Ramsey.
If you look at the Ramsey case, this went far beyond what you would expect. There were more mistakes made in this case than any other case I've ever seen.
I believe that when the case first started, that it didn't look like the Ramseys did this.
Within a week, it was clear that the Boulder Police Department had made up its mind. It was someone in the household. Game, set, match.
Jon Ramsey and his wife had been under this cloud of suspicion ever since then.
When a child is murdered, police have learned to look first at family members. Bizarre circumstances and unexplained evidence caused police to immediately focus their investigation on the Ramsey family. In the 20 years since this innocent child was so tragically murdered, every angle, every shred of evidence has been evaluated and reevaluated, except one. There has been one critically important missing link. Jon Benet's older brother, Burke Ramsey. Burke Ramsey was the only other person known to be in the house the night his sister was murdered, and he has never spoken publicly. He has never answered questions about what happened in this house the night his sister was murdered, until today.
Christmas Day, 1996. The Ramsey family had spent the evening at a holiday party. Patsy helped tuck 6-year-old Jon Benet into bed. That may have been the last time they saw their daughter alive. 5:30 a.m. the next morning. Patsy woke up early because the family was planning to leave town on vacation. She walked down the back stairs from her third-floor bedroom in their 15-room Tudor-style home in Boulder, Colorado.
And she went down the spiral staircase, and 3/4 of the way through the spiral staircase, she saw papers on the floor and started to read them.
The ransom note. Patsy skimmed the words. "We've kidnapped your daughter. Don't call the police or we'll kill her. Get $118,000.
Patsy was by the phone, so I said, call the police.
What's going on there, ma'am? We were kidnapping. Hurry, please.
About 20 minutes later, police arrived, followed by the FBI. For the next 6 hours, the Ramseys waited for the kidnappers' promised call. 2 different searches of the house turned up nothing.
It was a Boulder police officer, Linda Arndt, who told John to go with his friend Fleet White and search the house one more time.
They get to the basement. They go down the hallway towards the wine cellar, and he hits the light switch, and he immediately sees his daughter wrapped in the blanket laying on the floor. He notices her hands are tied. There was a piece of duct tape across Jon Benet's mouth. He sees a garrote around the neck. This was not a kidnapping. This was a murder.
You have a 2.5-page ransom note, a strangulation, sexual abuse. It just doesn't happen this way.
Strange story in Colorado where a 6-year-old girl thought to be a kidnap victim has been found dead. The child beauty queen was found in the basement of her family's home the day after Christmas.
It's also reported the girl was strangled with a noose-like cord and her mouth taped, and there were no signs of a break-in.
Jon Benet Ramsey's skull was fractured on the right side of her head.
She'd been battered, strangled, and sexually abused.
There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints in the snow. The rope used to choke Jon Benet was tightened with a paintbrush from her mother's hobby kit. An alleged ransom note was written on a pad of paper from inside the house.
The brutal killing of a pageant princess is raising troubling questions in many minds about child beauty contests.
I think the Jon Benet Ramsey case would have stayed a local story if it wasn't for one element. And that was those pageant videos that were released within a few days after the tragedy. Those videos showed a certain amount of sexuality from a young child.
People try to make it seem ugly and something that it wasn't. And I just know how much fun it was. What a good time we had together.
There were some negative connotations to these images, you know, whether the child had been pushed too far and whether this was symptomatic of some end result that caused the death of the child.
For 2 weeks now in Boulder, Colorado, an American tragedy has been unfolding. Tonight, no new clues in the search for answers.
The setting for this murder was not typical. Very affluent, exclusive neighborhood, beautiful multi-million-dollar home. All of these things led many people to believe, well, there can't be a bad guy walking around a place like that. It must be the parents or her brother.
The evidence that points to the Ramseys, I think, is the fact that they were in the house at the time of the murder.
Immediately, suspicion fell on the family, but the parents and son Burke always proclaimed their innocence.
The list of suspects narrows. Soon, there will be no one on the list but you.
Jon Benet Ramsey's parents hired attorneys shortly after their 6-year-old child was murdered and have communicated with police only through legal representatives.
Also, that's a red flag. Okay, well, the fact that they hightailed it out of Boulder, Colorado, after they just discovered their child, and this crazy 3-page ransom letter, and asking for the exact amount of Jon Ramsey's bonus. And I don't know, there are just so many odd things in this situation, not to mention the fact, I do believe that Jon Ramsey is a Freemason, and I do know that oftentimes they will cover for each other. Now, here's the situation. They said that they found evidence, she had a fractured skull, and that could have been from her brother lashing out, or he had done that before. He had hit her with a golf club before, and it wasn't the first time. And as a matter of fact, they had mentioned that she had marks on her that resembled a stun gun, which I find impossible because I think that would have made her scream worse. A stun gun would not make a child quiet. It would make them scream. If anything, they would have taken and put something like chloroform or something over a rag and put it over her face if they were going to do something to her. But why would they sit in the Ramsey's house for as long as it would take to write that letter? Because whenever I do read that letter, I mean, it's going to take a little while to read it because it is a very long letter. And I just don't see how they could think all that up and then ask for a ransom, to return the child, but they left the child at the house. None of that makes sense. And if it doesn't add up, come on, you have to go with your common sense. There's something that is not adding up here. And the Boulder Police Department, they messed up big time. And the FBI really too, because, when the FBI got there, they did say, what in the world's going on here? Because before the police even had a chance to get to the Ramsey's house, they had already called their friends, the Whites, that they attended the Christmas party from the night before. they were already at the house, and then other friends and other friends. Before you know it, there are like 2 or 3 different families roaming through this house looking for this child. This is a huge house. It's like a mansion, and um, it's just very strange that they did not make everybody get out of there as it was a crime scene and that child was missing. At least clear everybody out of there but the parents and, of course, their son. But even keep them in an area that you can kind of keep your eye on them, and you send the police officers to go look for the child. You don't send just random people, because what you're doing at that time is heavily contaminating a crime scene. And because, somebody other than the Ramseys had to be in that house to take Jon Benet, if it was none of the Ramseys, I'm saying, to take her out of her bed and carry her all the way down the steps. Obviously, probably the spiral staircase, because that's where the ransom letter would have been left. So, to go down those spiral steps and then go down there all the way down the basement steps, down into the basement again, and just go into some random back room that had really nothing in it. It was just like a little storage room. So my thing is this, like, what would all that be for? That would be like literally the most unlikely scenario to ever happen. So if it doesn't add up, then you have to go back and relook at this thing, because there is something. And I believe Patsy Ramsey, it ended up affecting her health, and that's why she died early. And I'm not blaming her, saying that she did something to Jon Benet, not on purpose. But like I said, I have seen pageant mothers that did slap or hit or hit other things that fell on um, their children, and they. I'm not going to make up excuses and lie and say that that's not the truth, because it is. And kids are kids, and sometimes they might not cooperate like you want them to because they're children. And sometimes pageant mothers, like I said, not all, but there are that just handful that are abusive. And if the child is not compliant constantly and always, they do lose their temper. And a child, I imagine, probably could get hurt. Um, but I don't think, like I said, that in itself has anything to do with the pageants. I just think those narcissistic type controlling mothers a lot of times flock to the pageants because it seems to be, about them more so than the children sometimes. And that's the only reason that I even say that and correlate anything to do with pageants in this case. And also to cover up and save face. If it was their son, like I said, they wouldn't want that to get out. And another thing, it did say that she was sexually assaulted. Okay, first of all, Burke was like 9, and I don't think he sexually assaulted her. Um, so I also think possibly if something did happen to their daughter, they could stage it to make it look like somebody did something like that to her, because possibly somebody in the house had sexually assaulted her in the past. And possibly something could have even happened, like, you know, children that are molested by their fathers sometimes, their pillows are put over their face or things like that, so that other people can't hear. And I do put a trigger warning on this video because this can bring up a lot of emotions in people. So I do want to say that, yes, there is a trigger warning on this because we're going to be talking about child SA and other things, and we're going to see things. And I should have done that at the beginning, but I'll go back and change that. But I do want to say that, I just want to tell you that may not be the video for you if you cannot stomach listening to this type of stuff. Because it does get kind of weird when it comes to her brother. So And like I said, just like in the Summer Wells case, I think that sometimes an accident can happen between even the children, but the parents are so afraid of the secret getting out about the abuse, the SA abuse, and they will cover up something. And I think in this case, it seems that might be the situation. So I just want to give that little bit of my 2 cents in there.
It has been said that you and Patsy did not cooperate with the police, that you, in fact, obstructed this.
Another thing, I'm not going to stand in the way of the police looking for my child. I mean, I'm just going to tell you right now, there is nothing I wouldn't do if I thought my child was missing, or if someone came into my home and did something like that to my little girl. You better believe I certainly would not lawyer up. If I did, it would only be because I don't trust the police sometimes, and I wouldn't want them to try to frame something. But I would definitely cooperate with the police, regardless of what my attorney said, um, because I would want them to go and find out who, killed my child, if we did not have anything to do with it. If my family, which would be me and my husband and my son Burke, if I was Patsy Ramsey, if I knew those three people had nothing to do with my daughter's death, you better believe that I'm going to cooperate and let them do what they've got to do. But mind you, they've already covered up something because they already knew. You don't let people roam around a crime scene touching everything in that house, contaminating evidence, because it could have been one of those people that did that. I mean, you've got a family friend, sometimes that can happen. I'm just saying, I mean, it's almost like they created all this chaos from the beginning so that the crime scene was contaminated and they couldn't really go forward with anything. I mean, there were so many fingerprints that should not have been there. Um, you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Investigation.
Well, it's totally false. Police came to our home and we talked to them for, seemed like hours. And they started this, well, we need you to come down to the police station. And that by now we had media trucks out in front. And Patsy was in no condition to be moved. She was in bad shape.
As we've been reporting, police in Boulder, Colorado finally have begun full-length interrogations of the little girl's parents.
I'm talking about scientific evidence.
I don't give a flying flip how scientific it is. Go back to the damn drawing board. I didn't do it.
They were still suspects in the eyes of the public and the police, who continued to focus almost exclusively on them, particularly Patsy.
The theory was that Jon Benet was killed by Patsy over bedwetting, and that the garrote was constructed for some reason to make it look like it was a kidnap killing gone bad. That was all part of the staging.
That's another thing, the bedwetting. Bedwetting in children at that age, oftentimes, it can be a sign that a child has been abused. Not always, because there are plenty of children that pee in the bed, I'm sure, that have not been abused. But it is one of the risk factors when you look for child abuse. That is one of the signs that you look for. It is bedwetting.
The garrote had intricate, complex, even unusual knotting. Someone knew what they were doing.
There are several key people investigators would like to question. Tops on the list, Jon and Patsy Ramsey, as well as their son Burke.
Coming up, the interview 2 decades in the making. Jon Benet's brother, Burke, breaks his silence.
You answer all the questions. You've said I can ask you anything. Nothing is off limit. Speak about this one time.
Wednesday on an all-new Dr. Phil.
My daughter is out of control. 13 years old, extremely
Provocative.
Danielle vanished with the keys to my crew member's car.
With her family,
She's threatened you with knives.
she's defiant.
Hi! Stop it. Oh, who are you?
But has she met her match
You want to do it again?
Sit down.
with Dr. Phil?
You can
That's
threaten them,
Good.
but I'm your worst nightmare, girl.
That's Wednesday.
That's one thing I don't like about Dr. Phil either. That little girl, that catch me outside girl. I don't like the way he handled that.
It's been nearly 20 years since 6-year-old Jon Benet Ramsey was found dead in her parents' home. Her
Okay, now I'm going to leave this on just to watch for a while.
Benet's murder, Burke Ramsey was the 9-year-old brother who, by all accounts, slept soundly in his room that Christmas of 1996, while his sister's skull was fractured and she was strangled nearby.
Her parents, John and Patsy, a 9-year-old brother Burke, were investigated but never charged.
So the question becomes, who? And the only other person in the house that night that we know of was Burke Ramsey.
So does Jon Benet's brother Burke have some memory locked away that could unlock the case?
Some people said that you had gone to great lengths to distance Burke from the Boulder police investigation.
Not at all. I've heard rumors where, well, we were hiding Burke because he was this crazy kid. Well, that wasn't the case at all. We were hiding him from the media, but no, we didn't hide him from anybody. We protected him. We hid him. We were worried about physical safety. I mean, we were under assault by the media and press and cameras and people. We didn't know who they were. We just didn't want Burke recognized because he was growing up. He was not a 9-year-old boy anymore. He was an 11-year-old, 12-year-old who wanted to have a normal life.
Would you respect our privacy, please?
It's being reported that investigators want to interview Jon Benet's brother, Burke. But why?
The experts say investigators want to re-interview Burke in the hope that he can help them piece together some new information.
Detectives want to talk to Jon Benet's 23-year-old brother, Burke, who was 9 at the time of the murder.
Many people bandied about the theory that Burke himself could be responsible for the murder.
As recently as 2010, investigators wanted to interview Burke Ramsey again. Burke did not speak to them. Why, 14 years after Jon Benet's death, did detectives still want to talk to him? Today, Burke breaks his 20-year silence and finally tells us what he knows about those tragic events. This was a no-holds-barred interview. Nothing was off limits. He agreed to answer any and all questions and to do so without a lawyer present. The night that your sister, Jon Benet, was killed, there were 3 people in that house that we know the identity of, and you're one of those 3, you, your mother, and your father. But in the 20 years that have gone by, you're the one that has never spoken. You've never talked about this publicly, and you've decided to do so now. My question for you is why now, and why here?
For a long time, the media basically made our lives crazy. I mean, it's hard to miss the cameras and news trucks in your front yard. And we'd go to the supermarket sometimes and there'd be a tabloid, you know, with my picture, Jon Benet's picture, plastered on the front. They would follow us around. Seeing that as a little kid, it's just kind of chaotic nightmare. So I was pretty skeptical of like any sort of media. Like it just made me a very private person. As to why I'm doing it now, 20th anniversary, there's apparently still a lot of attention around it.
Well, my goal here is that you answer all the questions. You said I can ask you anything. Nothing is off limits. You speak about this one time. Some people have speculated that your parents weren't protecting you, they were hiding you.
Yeah. And
that for this last 20 years that you've been hiding out instead of just choosing not to speak. What do you say to that?
For the last 20 years, I wanted to grow up like a normal kid, which does not include like going in front of TV cameras.
But if you had answered the curiosity, might that have stopped it all?
To me, it seemed like it would rouse it all up again.
I want to ask you some tough questions, but first, let's turn the hands of time back a little bit. When you look back, was Christmas like a really big deal at your house?
Yeah. decorations in the yard, on the inside. My parents would throw a party every year.
Hello, I'm Patsy Ramsey. Daddy's not here, but this is Jon Benet. She's 4, Burke is 7. And we'd like to welcome you to our home and wish you a very Merry Christmas.
Now, 2 days before Jon Benet was murdered, that was when the party was at your house, right?
Yeah.
And you had people tour the house?
I think there was like a Boulder home tour thing. Like, we weren't the only people that did it.
Right. They went house to house.
Yeah.
And looked at all the decorations. So when do you guys open gifts? That Christmas Eve or Christmas morning?
Christmas morning.
Do you remember what you did that morning?
I remember peeking down, and I remember seeing like an electric train and a bike, and I was super excited.
Was Jon Benet with you?
Yeah.
Did she peek too?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Did you get what you had asked for that year?
Nintendo 64.
And what did Jon Benet get?
I think she got a big dollhouse. We both got bikes.
It was a typical Christmas morning. A lot of neighbor kids came over after a while, and they were in and out of the house, but just a nice Christmas day.
Jon Benet got a doll for Christmas, right?
Patsy had sent his doll company a picture of Jon Benet, and they made a doll that supposedly looked like her. Patsy saw the doll lying in the box and kind of...
What did she say?
She said it looked like Jon Benet was in a coffin.
The highlight of the 25th was really a visit for dinner at Fleet and Priscilla White's home.
Fleet White was John Ramsey's best friend. Fleet White became a suspect and was interviewed 18 times by the authorities.
When Jon had fallen on the road, so you carried her in.
Mm-hmm. I laid her on the bed, and then Patsy went up later and I think put her pajamas on and tucked her in.
Christmas night in the Ramsey house. Jon Benet is tucked snugly into her bed, dreaming about her brand new bike. And Patsy Ramsey are down the hall in their room, presumably fast asleep. Brother Burke is sleeping in his room.
Do you remember the last time you saw Jon Benet alive?
Coming up.
After you went to bed that night, did you hear anything out of the ordinary at all during the night?
Dr. Phil's exclusive interview with Burke Ramsey continues.
Do you remember the last time you saw Jon Benet alive?
I want to say it was in the car on the way back from the Whites.
I think this is the last picture
Really?
that was ever taken of her alive.
I don't remember the hair being that long, but...
It's hard to believe that a short time later, she would be dead.
Yeah.
Where was your bedroom in relation to hers?
So it was like kind of around the corner, through the playroom, down the hall.
And this is your room?
Yep.
After you went to bed, did you hear anything out of the ordinary at all during the night?
No.
You don't recall waking up, hearing anything in retrospect?
No.
Melody Stanton, who lives diagonally across the street from the Ramseys, says she heard shrieks of agony coming from the Ramsey house 14 hours before Jon Benet's body was found in the basement.
And she thought it came from a lower part of the house. So if that, in fact, is the child's scream, then the child's life was taken in the wee hours of the 26th of December.
The next morning, you were heading off for a vacation trip over the Christmas holidays, right?
We had reservations to go on a family cruise with my older children. We both got up. Patsy had gotten dressed. I was shaving.
The first thing I remember is waking up, getting dressed hurriedly, going downstairs.
We weren't going to wake the kids up until we were absolutely ready to go because they could stay in their pajamas and jump in the car.
Then I go down the spiral staircase, and there on one of the runs of the stair is the 3-page ransom note.
Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We have your daughter in our possession.
You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Chilling words from the Jon Benet Ramsey ransom note, reportedly found by Patsy Ramsey on these stairs inside their home.
She came down these stairs and seen the ransom note on the bottom step.
And I ran back upstairs and pushed open her bedroom door, and she was gone.
I heard Patsy scream my name, and I knew something was seriously wrong.
Where did the scream come from?
It was either the first or second floor. Our bedroom was kind of up in an attic, and she had this ransom note.
It clearly said, you know, we have your daughter. It explained who they were. They wanted a certain amount of money. Don't call the police. We're watching you. If you do this, we're going to behead your daughter.
The note remains perhaps the most critical and perplexing piece of evidence in the ongoing murder investigation.
If you can, take me through that moment when she turns and hands you this ransom note.
It's hard to take it all in. As I recall, it was like, what? Your daughter's been taken. And it's a horrible, horrible feeling. I had that punch in the stomach feeling, and then I was trying to absorb what was said in this 3 pages of scribbling.
The ransom note threw everybody off. It was written on a notepad belonging to the Ramseys with one of their pens, and it took at least 15 minutes to write it. The ransom demand was for $118,000, which was exactly what John's Christmas bonus was.
Colorado newspapers are reporting that a practice ransom note was found, written on paper found in the Ramsey home.
So there's a lot of suspicion around the note. If somebody is going to kidnap somebody, by the way, you bring the ransom note already written. You don't write it inside the house.
I had it laid out on the floor because I was trying to, read it all at once. Patsy was by the phone, so I said, call the police.
911 emergency. Police, what's going on by 515th Street? What's going on there, man? We were kidnapped. Hurry, police.
By the time the first officer arrived at the scene, the house is filled with Patsy and John's friends. They called the Whites. They called Fernies. They called their pastor, the minister of their church. You know, the police made some very strategic mistakes. There may have been hair fibers from the perpetrator. There may have been footprints on the carpet. There may have been fingerprints. So now you have everybody going all over the house. You know, the whole place is like a little bit of like a train station by then.
The police come in a squad car.
All right.
Did that concern you? It says 2 men are watching your daughter. If you even talk to a stray dog,
no,
she's dead.
I would have called the Army if I could have.
But they pulled up in a police cruiser.
Well, they didn't know what was going on exactly, and so I don't fault them for that.
So you're okay at that point with what you're doing?
I want to get as much help as I can lay my hands on to find my child.
Do you remember waking up that morning?
Yep. The first thing I remember is my mom bursting in my room, really frantic, saying like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Running around my room looking for Jon Benet. At that point, I was awake.
Why did you feel scared? You know, when mom came rushing in?
I felt like something bad happened.
She left, and you could kind of hear her freaking out.
I sure mom was going to go.
Did you go down and see what was going on?
Stand there.
And the next thing I remember is a police officer coming to my room and shining a flashlight.
It was still dark when this happened.
Yeah, I was just laying there.
What time did she come in?
Early, I don't remember.
It was still dark, so it had to be pretty early. Did she turn on the light when she came in?
I don't remember if she did or not.
How long after she came in before the police officer came in?
Under an hour.
So she comes in, and were you asleep when she came in? Did she wake you up?
She woke me up.
And she's running around your room saying, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. What else did she say? Did you know she was looking for Jon